Welcome, superhuman. People like Jen light up a room with their presence. When I first saw her around the gym, she looked fit, strong, and beautiful. Then when I got a chance to know her, she was all that through and through. Someone so happy that you wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of anything other than her good graces. When I'm coaching someone like Jen, that's when we really get to have some fun and push the envelope. A competitive high achiever with solid strength base. This is when we get to fine tune and layer in some advanced training principles to see how much we could push her potential. An absolute pleasure and a blast to work with. Since leaving Adelaide, Jen has made her mark in both Melbourne and Sydney, continuously achieving her goals personally and professionally and inspiring others along the way, despite facing the personal challenge of a metastatic breast cancer diagnosis at the age of 37. She has since become a founder, speaker, advocate, and community leader, empowering women living with MBC, all while still working full-time. Jen's journey is a testament to her resilience and strength. She continues to impact lives positively, proving that even superhumans like Jen have their trials, yet her perseverance shines through. It is with great honor that I bring you today's episode featuring the remarkable Jen Byles.
My backstory, I suppose, yes, I have lived in Sydney. Coming up 3 years now. So moved up here in the fitness industry during the pandemic that was in Melbourne. So moved up here to Sydney. Absolutely love it. Like the lifestyle is exactly who I am, like outdoors. People are always doing something. It's by the beach, but you also can go for a hike. So always been very involved in the fitness industry as soon as I came up here, made lots of friends. And then it was in end of 2021, I think it is. So Sydney went into their own sort of lockdown for about 3-4 months, which was, it wasn't a bad time. The weather was great. We're outside training, but we weren't working properly. And it was probably around that time that I started to feel some sharp pains in my chest and sort of like a pain where it wasn't like a muscular pain. It was just something that I noticed. It was lasted for maybe 2-3 minutes and then sort of carried on. I sort of mentioned it to my girlfriends about it and they were like, we just sort of forgot about it. And it was probably, that was towards the end. Then it came into 2022 and I started feeling a lump. So this was probably like February, March. I started feeling a small lump and I was like, I feel something, but again, dismissed it. It's probably just a cyst. It's probably hormonal. Really didn't think anything of it. Then it got, another month on and it started to get bigger. And it got to the point where I suppose if you're laying down on your front to do something, it would start to hurt. So it was at that point where it started to get bigger. And I was like, said to my girlfriends again, I said, this lump isn't going away. And no one said, anything, like more so just a cyst. And it wasn't until June. So you think this has gone from the end, the year before to June that I finally went to the GP. So I just, moved to a new city. I didn't have a regular GP that, or a female doctor that I was comfortable or gone and seen on a regular basis. So I just asked a girlfriend, who do you go see? Do you have any recommendations? Went and saw a female GP and just explained to her what I was feeling. She did a breast exam there and then and said same sort of thing, reassured me like, it's probably just a cyst. Some young women just have, fatty breasts. It should all be good, but we'll send you off I'll refer you for a mammogram, ultrasound anyway. So this was at the start of June. And then the June long weekend came around. So it was at that point I was meant to go away, but of course my dog got sick. And so little Nevis. So instead of like booking in for that mammogram, because I knew I was going to be out of pocket because one, I'm under 40. It's not free. You do get a rebate from Medicare, but it's an upfront cost of, I think, if we can go into costs, through it, but I think at the time it was an upfront cost of maybe $700. So I was just like, okay, I'll put it off for another couple of paychecks and I'll go at the end of June. So anyway, booked it in, went along, had the mammogram, they then took me in and took an ultrasound. And then at that point, she got a doctor in and said, think we're going to take a biopsy from you today. It will save you coming back in. That's the way they, I suppose, reassured. Well, it will save you coming back in for a biopsy. Let's just get it all done today. So I don't know if anyone's had a biopsy. They're not like the most comfortable things. So I come out of there with, a huge crisscross shape, hole taken out of my left boob type thing. And then that was on, what day did I have that? I think I had it early in the week, maybe a Monday, Tuesday. And it was actually, I got a missed call from the GP on the Thursday. So I had made a follow-up appointment for the following week because I was like, oh, they're probably going to get the results. I'll just pre-book myself in for the following week. All good. Got a phone call from the doctor, receptionist, and said the doctor would like to see you as soon as possible. Are we able to move your appointment forward? So I said, sure. So we moved it forward. It was at that point I sort of got a little bit anxious. So I remember calling my mum and just explaining, they've called me in, I'm sure it's fine, but I'm a little bit sort of anxious about this whole situation. Same with a girlfriend, reassuring words, it'll be fine, you'll be fine. So off I went on my own to the doctor. I didn't think anything of it, then got into the room, and I suppose she was, like I said, the only other time I've seen this lady is for this first appointment of the breast check she's given me. So the second time I've then come into her doctor's room, she sat me down and she goes, we've got the results back. We're so sorry. It's an invasive carcinoma. You have breast cancer. So I remember at that time, it was obviously June, end of June. So it was like a colder day in Sydney. I had this puffer jacket off and I just felt like I have to get this off. Like I stood up and I was just like in shock. And I was just remember sitting there and I think she was telling me all the words or what I need to do. And I was just like, yep. I think my body just went into like that fight mode. It's like, sure, whatever we need to do, just, yep, okay, we'll do this. So it was all really, and it's probably like if you had have asked me to tell this story, I think maybe 12 months ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to tell you this how it was, because it was all literally a blur. The next 6 months are a blur. So we literally, after she told me that I had breast cancer, she'd made an appointment so this was on a Friday, she'd made an appointment first thing on Monday for me to go see a breast surgeon. Because at that point they don't know what stage, they haven't done staging yet. All they've done is obviously a biopsy and said that yes, whatever's in your breast is cancerous. They don't know the extent of it from there. So she writes at the top of a piece of paper. I had to go out to reception. I just remember standing in this reception on my own going, what the hell? I've just been told I have breast cancer. Like, this is like the most weird, like, it was just such a weird situation. Paperwork, walked out of the medical center and I tried to call my mum. Mum was like not answering. She tried to call my girlfriend, they weren't answering. Like, it was just that moment, you're just like, I feel so alone right now. I've just had the most crazy news and I've got no one to share it with. So I took my piece of paper, I walked down to the car park and I just like sat in my car. I can't even remember if I cried or not. I think I was just more in shock. I was just like, and also you don't know all the information. All you know that you've got breast cancer. You don't really know anything else. So yeah, then I think at the time we finally got hold of my boyfriend as well. And when I say boyfriend, we had been dating 3 weeks before I was diagnosed. So this was all very new. So I suppose we're dating rather than calling him my boyfriend at that point. yeah, we just went for a drive and went for a walk. And through that, I finally got hold of like girlfriends and friends and just those close to me to start. Because I was like, I think that was one of the, well, initially the hardest things to get over is like, how do you tell people that you've got like breast cancer? Like you just, it's not something that you ever think you're going to have to tell people. And like when you do come to that situation, like I said, I'm a pretty open book, but like to tell people that it's pretty, scary. Because you just, unfortunately, we only know what you know at that time. And that's why, as we move on, like I'm such a big advocate for sharing and getting young women to know more about their bodies and know more about themselves, because we're not, and I don't want to be morbid and teach people how to say these things, but a lot of the times you don't know what to say to someone when they tell you these things, and you get really awkward and you get a bit uncomfortable, but it shouldn't be that way. So I suppose that's in a nutshell the very beginning of how it started, but it sort of snowballed from there in the next 2 weeks. So if you want me to keep going, what happened in those 2 weeks, because that probably, I suppose, then rolls into where I'm at now. So after that initial appointment, the next week, the first point of call, they send you to a surgeon, because with breast cancer, depending on what stage it is, you may have to have surgery, obviously a mastectomy. So I had to go see them. And from there, it was more tests. It was scans. It was an MRI. It was more biopsies. So that pretty much took up that whole first week where they're getting into the sort of staging of it. And even from there, from what we learnt from those tests, is that so it had already spread from the breast. So there was a tumor in my breast, a 4 by 3 centimeter tumor. So it was growing quite aggressively, a 60% growth rate. So that's hence why in that 6 months it got bigger and bigger, because of what a cancer cell does is it doesn't know when to stop growing. So it just keeps on multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. So after we found out that, we also found out it was hormone positive. So that means that obviously women, obviously and men, we're full of estrogen. So estrogen is what fed or feeds my cancer. It is so your own body's hormones are sort of fighting against you in a way. So that's how it was growing. So we found it obviously in the breast, then we found it in also the axillary nodes, which are like your lymph nodes under the breast, which automatically means it's gone from stage 2 to stage 3 because it's moved outside of where it's originally come from.
Yep.
And then probably one of the scariest experience I had on that following Friday from diagnosis, I had to go in for a bone biopsy. So my scans had showed up something on my pelvis and something on my spine, but they couldn't confirm. So with a PET scan is where they put the dye through you. And anything that sort of, I suppose the cancer glows. It sucks up sort of the glucose and all of that in your body. So it glows. But also your organs and all of that can glow as well. But that's how they can pinpoint cancer in those smaller areas. So it picked it up slightly in my pelvis, slightly in my spine, but they couldn't confirm. It wasn't really that big, but they could see it. So there was a cancer trial, a drug trial that I was eligible for if it hadn't spread anywhere else. If it was contained to the breast and the lymph nodes, then I was a really great candidate for what they wanted. So I was like all for it. So to do that, they said we need to do this bone biopsy to find out whether it is. So went in there, it was just a long day. And I'm someone who, and I have never been to hospital, as in I've never broken a bone. I've never had anything like that. So for me, I had to go in one, I had to fast, which for me, I love food. So that was also hard because my appointment was meant to be at 1:00. So I think I had to be in there at like 11 to like check in, get everything sorted. Got to 1:00. They still hadn't seen me. I think I ended up getting into there at 5 p.m. So it was so delayed. And then it felt like I was in there for 2 minutes, but I clearly wasn't. So they numbed. So with the bone biopsy, they had to get into my pelvis. So they had to numb, obviously, that area, because the bone biopsy, again, is not a very nice thing to have. They're literally drilling into your bone and taking a little piece. So we were in there. They did all of that. Didn't feel a thing. I was fine. I was obviously awake for the whole thing, but then got back to the room and it was quite late. I finally got to eat. But then after a couple of hours, I still couldn't feel my leg. Like my leg was literally like dead and it was like drop foot. So I was like, that's when I sort of the panic of like, what's going on? Why can't I feel my leg? And they were like, well, we can't send you home until you can walk because of duty of care. And, another few hours went on. It still wasn't coming back. So it was nearly getting to midnight by then. And like, we have to close this ward. We're going to have to find you a bed. So they found me a bed. And I was taken up actually to the cancer ward. Where obviously patients are in overnight. So I had my own bed, not my own room. So I think it was just like, one, I'm laying in this bed. I've only been newly diagnosed. I can hear people in like pain and agony and all of that in the wards beside me. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, is this my life now? But also the fact that I couldn't feel my leg. I'm like, not only do I have cancer, I'm never going to be able to walk again. Like something, dramatic, but like, it was just a whole experience. Like I had to be helped to the toilet because I just couldn't walk. And it was just like, this is not where I saw myself like a week ago. So we had the bone biopsy. Pleased to know 12 hours later, my leg came back to life and I was able to walk out of hospital. But yeah, it was a very much like just a very exhausting and a very, a very, I suppose, traumatizing experience, like first off. So I think that happened on the Friday. Didn't end up getting those results until the Wednesday. So some other things, this is where I'm saying these 2 weeks just like filled with everything. So I think it was the Thursday actually before the bone biopsy, because they were going down the first route was that I was only stage 3. I was most likely going to have a really high dose of chemo. And I'd probably be doing chemo for up to 6 months. So that was the initial diagnosis. Like I said, they're still doing tests, so they still don't know that. So with that, they talk about obviously IVF and egg freezing, because the potential obviously of chemo obviously harming eggs, and so they talk about IVF. So they suggested that I do that sooner than later because I'd have to do that before I do the chemo. So off I went on the Thursday into like IVF Australia, had the appointment, had everything checked. And I suppose as well, I was 37. I didn't mention that as well. I was 37 when I got diagnosed. So it's still probably one of those things in the back of your mind, like, am I even fertile? Like, or, and it was just so, I suppose, reassuring. I went to that appointment and they checked everything, said, oh yeah, we're all good. This is great. We'll definitely be able to do this. There's plenty there. We can do this pretty much. If you want to do this, you need to make your decision pretty soon. Well, as in now, because we need it. Like if your doctor says you need to start chemo in 2 weeks, we have to get this sort of ball rolling. So said yes, signed the dotted line, ordered what I needed to do the egg collection at home. Pretty much got that notification on like the following week, the Tuesday, to say that the drugs were ready to pick up for they have to be specially ordered. Sorry, they had been ordered, so they'd be ready for collection Wednesday, Thursday. went back into the doctors on the Wednesday. And my dad was down from Queensland, so he came with me. Again, probably a bit of a blur for both my parents as well, having, their 37-year-old daughter being told that she's got breast cancer. So off we went to the hospital and literally sat there, and my oncologist goes, "I'm so sorry. We didn't think it would be, but your bone has come back positive for cancer," which that was shocking anyway, which I didn't really understand. But the one thing he said, "I know you that IVF was, the egg collection was something you really wanted to do. We've discussed with the team and we can't allow you to do that. This means you won't ever be able to do this." From what that means is, if I was going to go down this path of egg collection, you obviously inject yourself with estrogen. Because my cancer is estrogen based. I'd literally be feeding the cancer. And they're like, it's kind of that, which they always do. The risk was too high for me. So the risk was too high for me to do that. Because obviously they didn't know what would happen. So I had to, I just found out that it's what they said. They didn't say stage 4. They didn't say that. They just said it's metastatic breast cancer now. Don't go home and Google it, type thing.
Okay.
Because if you do Google it, it doesn't come up with the nicest responses. So what it means, metastatic, is exactly where I said stage 3 is where it's spread from the original place in the breast to the lymph nodes. Stage 4 or metastatic or advanced, or they're probably the 3 most common terms, is where it's spread then from the lymph nodes, it's spread to either your organs or your bones. So it's, managed to every part of your immune system, every part of your body it's slipped past it, and it's allowed to set up camp somewhere else. So for me, it was in my pelvis, in 4 spots they found it, and then also in my T11, so in my spine. They also found, which was another test I had to have the following week, because they're like, well, we might as well tick all the boxes here. I had to go in for, I can't remember the name, it's got the fancy name, where they shoved the tube up your nose, and they had to go and get biopsy my lymph nodes in my lungs. So the lymph nodes there came back positive, but that's just when I say just, the lymph nodes, it's not in the lungs. It was just the lymph nodes in the chest. So that's a good thing, because obviously if it was in my lungs, that would not have been as good. But still in your bones is not really a good thing. So I suppose, it was big. Yeah, it was just a really surreal, I'd say surreal experience. We had that day I found out, had my girlfriends, 3 best girlfriends from Sydney, come over, and we just drank a lot of wine and just had dinner and just talked about stuff that wasn't cancer related, and just, the good times and all of those things, because I suppose you're whacked in the face with this news. And it's taken a long time, I think, for it to sink in and work out what that means as well. Because you're not given a lot of again, why I'm a huge advocate, a lot of the stuff you hear is about older women. It's about, and I don't mean this in any, sound bad or anything like that, but, some women that have had their children, they've had, lived, that portion of their life and done all those things. And I feel like I haven't even had scratched the surface of things that I would like to do, or thought, where I think, we all have feelings, doesn't matter whether you have cancer or not, of where you think you should be. But this was just like, oh my God, like, am I on like a time limit now to do all these things? So it's definitely changes the way you think a lot.
Yes. Well, it's changed your life. Like, in a couple of weeks even. And then trying to deal with that new trajectory that your life is now to be and has become. far out. I don't even know where to start. It's
I know. It's a lot of information. And I think that's the thing. It's a lot of information to take in that 2-week period. So at that point, I was still working full time. I didn't mention the day I got diagnosed, after being on the ward, I literally went and trained that afternoon, just like no one knew. I think it was just like, I just want to feel like me again, I suppose, for one moment.
Yeah.
But it's been a real, because that was June 2022. So it's been a good 16 months now of diagnosis. So there's a lot that's gone on in that time.
Yeah.
Starting treatment, which treatment, again, if we go into that, that's a very different, I suppose, experience, and not a lot of people, I suppose, understand about metastatic breast cancer, and the options that are out there, because I was the same. I think you think of cancer treatment and you think, okay, you're going to have chemotherapy and you're going to get really sick, and that's just how it is. Where mine's been none of that, but the diagnosis is still there, because I suppose what we didn't mention is metastatic. Currently, there is no cure. It's treatable, but they say it is like life limiting. They don't have a cure for it. So, if you want me to go into how that works and the treatment side of things, so we were first treatment that they started me on. So it's still like, I think there's still discussion. I mean, I feel like I'm one of the lucky ones, in sense that I've had really amazing oncologists and really amazing nurses to be able to be comforting and talk through things and why. But I know that, that's not always the case, because you're being put on these drugs that, the first one was hormone therapy. So the hormone therapy is what, obviously, my body is now starved of estrogen. So I've been put into medically induced menopause at the age of 37, which I'm sure you know a lot about menopause yourself, as in just going through with clients. And it's, again, same with cancer. It's not just about getting a hot flush. It's, I think for me, the menopause side of things, the mental side of things, is what they don't talk about a lot, including like the brain fog and the mood swings. I have just been someone who's always been a very level head. I found that I've always been pretty good. Like, I've never been depressed. I've never had, really big mood swings. I've never had really bad periods or anything like that. So just not something I've experienced. So that was a huge learning curve. But the treatment for that is I take 1 tablet a day. That's what that does is for the adrenals, that stops the estrogen. And then I get an injection once a month, and it's the biggest needle you'll ever see in your life. It's the Zoladex. So they put that underneath the skin. It's like a little pellet that releases, and that stops the ovaries from producing estrogen. So it's kind of like a double whammy. With that, a lot of females say that they can get a lot of joint pain. Because obviously estrogen is, used to lubricate your joints, and it's lubricate your body, everything. But to say I haven't had a lot of joint pain, and I honestly put that down to the amount of training and strength training and moving my body, because I found that that's one thing that I haven't had. It's more like hot flushes, and the moods has probably been the biggest thing, where a lot of women talk about the achy joints and stuff. So I'm lucky in a sense I haven't had that. So they started me on that first, and then we started on I'm also on another injection, which is for bone strength. So it's what they'll give, that should give elder women at every 6 months, usually for osteoporosis. So I get that injection once a month and a pretty high dose. So obviously, because it was found in my bones, they want to just make them really, really strong. And that was one question I did ask the doctors as well. I'm like, because the biggest thing as well, I want people to know, other than that lump, like I did not feel any different.
Yeah.
I was literally lifting the heaviest I've lifted. I was, I was fit. I was like so fit. I was probably like coming into my peak that I've never been that fit before. So I was like loving life. I was not feeling like, I feel like my sleep's always been bad, but I wasn't noticing any, like, I wasn't tired. I wasn't like run down, everything else. There was no other way that I would be thinking. So I asked my oncologist, I said, well, how would have I known, like if it had spread, like what he said, probably I would have just been doing something maybe simple, like out an activity, and I might have fallen and I might have broken my leg, like as simple as that, because it would have just eaten away at the bones. And you probably, so it's always those things as people like, well, oh, you're looking so well. It's like, well, I never didn't not feel well. So it's a really, like I said, it's a real mind game, half of the battle. But then I've been put on the other drug that I'm on. So I'm on hormone therapy. Then they tack that on with what's called targeted therapy. So targeted therapy is a really new drug that's only come onto the scene probably in the last couple of years or so, maybe a bit more. But definitely the drug I'm on has only been on the PBS for a couple of years, which means it's readily available, and two, I can afford it. So the drug I'm on is called ribociclib. It's targeted stops. So we're talking about the cancer cell keeps on growing. It stops that cell from growing. So it doesn't kill, it just stops it from growing. So eventually it'll make it shrink because it can't grow anymore. Yep. So super amazing drug. Very limited side effects I've had. First few months, probably 4 months or so, I was on the highest dose. So I just knew it's a 3-week on, 1 week off cycle. So I just knew by the third week, my fatigue, I was just like, if I did too much, I would be on the couch for 2 days, which again was like getting myself used to that I couldn't do all the things that I, loved. And I think it was sometimes easy for people to say, oh, you'll be right. It's like, fine. I'm like, oh, I tried that. It did not work. And I felt horrible. So, this drug is, I suppose, a big thing as well. Why when people think, oh, breast cancer's got so much like research and it's got so much money like thrown into, yes, it does. But at the same time, it is one of the biggest rates of deaths of cancer in Australia in women. So, and we still don't have a cure. So I think it's really important to know when you're donating, where your money is going. Because, I think going into research is really important, because that's why especially in my case, because I'm relying on new drugs coming through, because the more drugs we have available, the longer my lifespan will be. Yeah. Because unfortunately, we hope that this drug I will be on for a very, very long time, but also we don't know. And that's the thing about cancer, and especially metastatic, is we just don't know how the body will continue to react. Sometimes the body can get immune to the drug, so therefore it stops working, because or the cancer outsmarts it and it starts to multiply, or so there's just so many still unknowns, which is something I don't think it's hard to say whether it's bothered me. I think it's more just like, it just didn't think I'd be the person that has to deal with this like on a daily basis. I think that's what gets in your head a lot.
Yeah, the uncertainty.
Yeah.
Jen, I have to say, like, thank you so much for the level of detail that you've gone into. I hope
that I know it's important for people to
Mm.
hear, even irrespective of their situation. You might know somebody who's going through, I mean, the chances are you do know someone who's going
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
breast cancer. And especially, you know, where we are young, and like you said, it is different for our age group and below. Like, I just literally heard of a friend of a friend who's only 25 who's been diagnosed with breast cancer. So it is becoming more prevalent in younger women, and I think that it's important to hear a perspective like yours, and especially because, you know, you have been always deemed to be a fit and healthy person. You said so yourself, that you haven't been to hospital. It's not a familiar place for you. It's not for me either. And so, like, whenever like people like you and I go to a hospital system, they just look at us and they're like, what are you doing here? You know, like, how can I help you? Like, you look fine. And they sort of is a little bit dismissive. So it's, you know, people expect you to look sick because, you know, you've had this diagnosis, whereas you still are a fit and healthy person. You're still training, you're still running, you know, you freaking killed it with the life-saving stuff you did earlier this year. That was sensational. So, you know, like, you're not the epitome of what people expect.
No.
You know, a person with your diagnosis to be doing and look like.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, I think it's important to share your message. And I think I want to take it back a little bit to the symptoms, because when you were talking about like having a bit of a lump, and, you know, and even the doctor was like, oh, it's probably a cyst. We have a lot of fatty tissue in our breasts. So, you know, people always say, oh, it's probably a bit of fatty tissue, or, you know, it could be that time of the month, or, you know, it's very like dismissive is probably the best word for it. And, you know, and I was saying to you off camera as well, like, even in my own naivety, as a woman who's not well endowed, I always sort of thought that, you know, I don't have any family history of it, because I generally only hear of it happening with women who are much more endowed and have family history and all that sort of stuff. So I'm like, I feel like I dismiss it a little bit in myself, because I'm like, well, it's unlikely, you know. But I think in your situation, you also didn't have family history of it. Was that correct?
Yeah, no family history. And from what I'm only learning now is it is actually only a very small percentage that do have family history. But I think it's just so, again, it's so like the media sometimes exaggerate that about the, you know, this gene that you can have, but the percentage is actually higher of women that don't have the gene that get breast cancer. So we're all exactly that. I think we don't talk about it how it really is. We're like, oh, but I don't have the gene, I'll be fine. Or no one in my family's had it, so I'll be fine.
Yeah.
I think
definitely are guilty as charged of being naive to that as well.
And men get breast cancer as well. So it's not just a female. It's not just a female thing. Yes, it is a very low percentage, but men still get breast cancer. So I had the other day, when I was talking about it, or I think some guy just dismissed it. Oh, that's okay, it won't happen. I'm like, you know that guys can get breast cancer. Like, this isn't just a female thing. It is obviously more because it's breast, but, you know, we have breast tissue. So, but I think it's just, not to be scared. It's about and advocating for yourself. And it's not like rushing off to the doctor every time you feel something. It's knowing you're normal. And that's a big thing. It's like, and that's why you'll probably hear myself say, or other organizations, you know, check it on the 1st or check it on the 5th, you know, have a date in your calendar that you check regularly. Like I didn't check, but I thought I knew my body, but this is where I'm a bit naive. Well, clearly I didn't, because I would have gone and got it checked 6 months earlier. But it's just knowing that. And if there's something that, that you notice that's there, that's okay. But if you notice that it's still there and it's changed a little bit, it's like getting your skin checked. If you know a mole, you're like, okay, that's okay. But then you notice some changes, you go get it checked. Why don't we do the same with something that's a bit more? And I think it's because it's a little bit more personal. It's our, it's our boobs, it's our body. It's the same with everywhere. But if we don't, know our normal, then we're running the risk of just, I suppose, hate to say it, but in my situation, where you're someone who, I left it too late, and it could have been something where I could be cured and I wouldn't be on treatment right now. My treatment would have ended.
Yeah. And I think we're also saying as well that, like, because you were a fit and healthy person, so we also think that lifestyle and you know, food choices. I mean,
Yep.
obviously you said even with the PET scans, like the cancer loves to feed off the glucose. So it's like, you know, that in itself, people should be a wake up call for, you know, what you put into your bodies. But it doesn't necessarily mean that because you're healthy, you're also exempt.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah. And I suppose I did the right thing in the way that when I was early diagnosed, I did only read, I probably just looked at Breast Cancer Network Australia. I didn't really go in and Google a lot of things because that's where you can go down the rabbit hole of really bad misinformation. And even now there still is, you know, we're all on social media and there's TikTok and there's Instagram. There's always information out there being fed to us. But in the same sense, I did find it really hard to find good information, as in the right information, without sending yourself down a rabbit hole, which I didn't want to do. So that's something that I'm, again, advocating for, is to try and get more, I suppose, just I wanted to hear it from not necessarily someone from the same, that's had the same thing, but I want to know how they, I suppose, were supported and how they got through the tough times, like, you know, the finances, all the things, again, like we probably talk about, you don't get taught in school. Like, I don't necessarily need to know all those things, but trying to find some information relevant for young people was really hard.
Yeah. And that emotional support, because that's what I was thinking. It's like in that period from diagnosis and 2 weeks, you know, a lot happened in that 2 weeks. You were definitely propelled into an acceleration of a roller coaster of emotions, and, you know, a lot of big pain points to deal with in such a short period of time. And you even said that, like, you just felt so alone because obviously you couldn't contact your mum and your best friend at that time, and just having to sit with that, you know, it's like, where's the guidebook on how to deal with your emotions and going through it. And to your credit, again, because you are a beautiful soul, is thinking about, how do I tell people what I'm through? Whereas it's like, this is your thing and you're worried about how you're going to tell other people. And then other people are like, well, exactly what you said. It's like, how do I react to what you're telling me as well, you know? And so what ended up happening, like, in terms of how, you know, did you just blurt it out and like?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure with my girlfriends, I just told them straight up. Like, I think they knew that I'd gone to get this scan. So they knew. And then I've got obviously my close girlfriend group from back in Adelaide. And I remember having to put together a text to text them, like in the group chat. It was just easier to do it all in one lump sum.
Yeah.
And then I think I waited, like, it was something where people talk about social media. It was something like, do I, don't I? I think I waited maybe a week, but for me, it's like a personal thing. And it's like, I've shared so many other things. It's like, it was really like a no brainer, because if, again, not putting it back on other people, it's like, I feel like people need to know this. Like, this isn't something I want to hide. You know, and I was still learning, and am learning so much about, you know, breast cancer in general. I've met some amazing women along my journey so far. And, you know, some of them have been living with this for like 5, 6, 7 years. So they know a lot more about it than me. So it's been an experience, but to tell, like I said, I was fortunate that I work in, obviously, a gym, and the Cube has the most amazing, generous community. You know, I had only been working there 6 weeks when I got diagnosed as well. So it was quite a new position. And they just like took me in and under their wing and supported me and gave me whatever I needed. So I think that's, in saying, really great of the fitness community in general. I think I would love to hope that is everywhere around, I suppose, Australia and the world, that the fitness community seem to have a really tight-knit unity where they sort of, rally each other, which is really great.
Yeah. I think that I've loved seeing that you've had so much support, in your own community, doing fundraisers and with other foundations and, a lot of other charitable institutions that have, backed you and you backed them as an advocate to spread the message. And I think that, not to, I don't want to skip over the fact that that's a very courageous thing that you've been able to do, especially so early on. Like you said, it was a week till you shared it on social media, and a lot of people may need a lot more time before to process and emotionally grieve and deal and just all these sorts of things. And so it's quite courageous of you to actually do that, and take people, I think, and that's why people admire you so much as well. It's like, because you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable and share the process. You're not sharing like, oh, this is all great and rosy. Like, you're actually also sharing, she shares quite openly on her social media, guys, that like, her down days, and that's real stuff right there. And I think that that's probably something that, we should all see more of, because usually it's all rosy, and I'm, guilty of that as well. I don't usually share a lot of my down days, but that's real. We all go through the ups and downs, and you've gone through, like I said, an accelerated pace of all the things. And so good on you for actually getting, you're owning it. And I think that that's probably been, a bit of your saving grace throughout this period, is that you've just stood at the front of what's going on and, not tried to shy away from it and go through. You still go through your
Oh, I definitely do. Yeah. I've definitely been through, I must say, the dark side of things. So it's definitely not, but it has helped, because I think it's, I mean, I can't say no everyone who follows me on social media, but a lot of the people, I look at it, I go, I do know them, and I want to share, and, the feedback you get from, even if it's one person saying thank you, because that really helped me today. I needed to hear that today. That's one person, you just don't know who's watching, who's listening, who needs it. And if you can take, I suppose, that away from things, I mean, there's a lot of ego in this world, which we don't necessarily need. And it's definitely, what I'm doing is not about that at all. It's, sharing real, I suppose, a real part of me, because, and everyone, when I say you're on for the journey, because you are, because I'm still have no idea sometimes what is going on or what's happening. So just rolling with it at the moment. But if we go back and suppose touch on where you said, everything looks rosy, there was the time, it was like I said, that first 6 months was a real blur. I had to put myself I found myself in that real training slump, which like I said, I've never been one that's been greatly emotional person. Like, I feel like I can talk how I want, but when it comes to tough conversations and stuff, I find that I'm very good at being strong and hiding those emotions. So I think this experience or diagnosis has really come to the forefront a lot of emotions, which you just mentioned about, like grief and stuff that I'd never had to deal with before. So it was a really, really big challenge. And I did find myself, dipping up and down, like the ebbs and flows. I've had ebbs and flows before, but nothing like this. Like, the highs were high and the lows were low. And that's why I suppose the life-saving thing, it was a really big goal. I'd said that before I was diagnosed, that I want to get back into life-saving. So I did it. Like, I had to do my bronze, redo my bronze, had to get out there and train again, because I said I was going to do it. I have to do it. And I'm so competitive that I also didn't want to go out there and be shit. So I had to be, so I did that. And then it came to, like, I went over to Aussies and I did well there. But I think it was after that, because I just kept myself so busy and so focused on that goal, that it was like a fall from grace. I came back and I felt so depleted. I was like, I had no goal. I'd been 6 months on treatment. It was all going well, which was, you know, I was meant to be happy and excited and so, you know, great about this working, but I just couldn't find it within me to be excited. It was a really tough moment. And that's, I suppose, where, sorry, a light just went out. Where I decided to drop down to part-time at work, because I just needed to focus a bit more time on myself, which I don't think, like you say, I continued to work full-time because I didn't know any different. I'd never not worked. So it's like, well, just because I got this, why not just work? Because what else am I going to do? So yeah, that's been since April. I've now been working part-time, which is, and I must say it still took a long time to get into that like habit of like, you don't have to work today. I'd still like open up the laptop, check an email or something, because it's just so ingrained in us, especially like, you know, I'm meant to be in my peak of my career right now, you know, managing a gym, doing something I love, and like all of those things was very, very mentally challenging. But I also recognize that. So I did go seek help from that as well. So don't forget your mental health plans.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Especially like, you know, in situations like yours or and I also don't want to discredit any other situation that's been traumatic.
Of course. Yeah.
You know, because it's like you have to determine within yourself, like as your own personality, like how much can you handle, you know, like you said, you've always been a strong person. So you've always sort of taken it on the chin, but it doesn't mean that you don't have to deal with your raw emotions underneath either. And, you know, you had to go through a lot, you know, not being told that you couldn't go through your IVF process. You know, it's like, you could accelerate your cancer growth or you could try to do this. And it's like, you know, it's a big decision to have to make in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
And it's something you just, that's a whole nother kettle of fish, because I think trying to explain to people, which exactly that, you don't have to explain to anyone what it is. But when you say that, I think then you add another layer about that it's just like, sometimes I brush over that because it's too much for people to understand, because they just think, oh, there's other ways and stuff. It's like, well, there is, but then I've got a diagnosis where they don't know a timeline. So it's a bit hard, you know, it's just, that's what I mean. You're feeling like you have to explain a situation, which I think if more people would get to understand what that might mean, then we don't sort of have to have these awkwardness about it.
You are such a selfless, like if anyone's listening to, like, how selfless is she? Like, oh, I don't want to like talk about the fact that, you know, I've had to deal with that because it's too much for other people to digest. Like, you know, like, okay, so because it is quite common. Like, people who listen to this podcast are strong-minded, career focused, family, like we're all similar beings. So how would be what would be the best way to react to the conversation? Because, you know, it's a sensitive topic and we do want to be respectful to the person who shared this information with us. Like, I've had my best friend, she had this not this diagnosis, but she had cancer back when, just before her 30th birthday. And so, you know, young, right? So it's like, okay, like she just sat me down and told me, and it's like, okay, like, you know, like I didn't really know what to say. It's like, what do you think is an appropriate reaction for someone to have? Like, obviously you don't want people to, you know, look at you with pity or whatnot. Like you just want to be able to share, you know, like you said, normalize the conversation. Let's just have a conversation about it. And like, what do you think about reaction?
Yeah. Well, when I was definitely, if anyone knows me, I'm quite into sarcasm and dark humor. So when I was first diagnosed, I think the people that I really responded to well were the people that just came up to me and said, you know what, Jen, it's just shit. It's just really, really shit. And I think that just made me feel good, because I could go, yeah, it is shit. Like, it's where... And I also, and I don't want to say it again, but it is, I also, when people don't know what to say, I also know, like, I respect that as well, because it's really is a hard situation. But for someone to come up to you and say, I'm sorry for what you're going through, but I'm here to listen and support you. You know, I'm here for you. I think that's more prevalent than anything, where a lot of times if people will come up to someone who has cancer or a similar diagnosis and be like, how can I help? What can I do? That their brain, my brain, does not know what the hell it wants to do. I've got so much other stuff that I need to remember and think of. I can't think of something to delegate you to do for me. So if you've got a friend, my biggest thing is to just say, you know, I'm sorry, it's shit. I'm here to support you. I'm here to listen. So one, they feel like they can openly have a conversation because they're here to listen. They're not here to give advice. Because that's another thing I think what a lot of people will say is like, I know that your best friend's aunt's had a sister that's had cancer, and like, I appreciate it. And I get it. That makes them feel good, and it makes them feel like they're connected with you. But I think it's being able to offer the support. Just, you know, they might not say they want anything, but go down and buy them, you know, some food, a bag of groceries, pre-make them some meals, because that goes a lot further. Or like buy them a massage if you want to, like donating stuff. But if it's just your time, just say, take them out for a walk, say, let's catch up, let's go for a walk, and say you want to listen. Not necessarily, because I think a lot of the time, sometimes you feel the pressure that you need to talk and you need to talk about it. And also having someone to, I suppose, get you out and about, because we know how good exercise and fresh air is for people. So, you know, I think that's probably my top tips and what I've learned. And I've probably only learned that, you know, later on, is not necessarily people. Yeah, you don't necessarily need people offering advice. You just want them to listen. And also, yeah, the whole that they're knowing that they're there for support. Yeah.
No, thank you. I think that that's an important message to hear from you, you know, especially having gone through this and received a whole host of different reactions and, you know, comments and things. So, or not, you know, because at the same time, when people go through things like that, like, you know, even admittedly, I haven't reached out to you as, you know, like it's one of those things. It's like, well, hey, I haven't spoken to you in like 5 years, or, you know, but hey, oh, you know, oh, that's a shit.
Yeah.
Like, like, of course, like my heart ached, you know, when I saw your news and things like that. So obviously I was sending you my love and support from afar, but it's just one of those things, right?
Yeah. And I don't think I've ever, and whatever, I was never like I'd never judge someone for not reaching out, even though I know that they're there, because I also don't know the full extent of what they've been through. They may have had a traumatic experience themselves with losing a loved one, and for them is too close to home, and it, you know, it triggers them. But that's not me. That's not because of me. That's them, and they need to deal with that. So, you know, I respect that as well. If they haven't got, because energy is so precious, your time and energy is so precious. And that's what I've learned a lot about as well, is that setting boundaries for yourself, which is something that I didn't do very well. And I'm still very much learning that. But I do know my boundaries with time and energy. And I think I said to you the other week, by the end of the week, I just know if I've had a really busy week, I'm spent. I've got no extra energy to give anyone. And I need to put my boundary up and say, I need to give that energy to myself first, because I'm useless without that.
Yeah. That's important. Like everything you just said there, and compassion for each other, really, at the end of the day. You know, yes, everybody judges everybody, but, you know, not everybody shows everyone compassion and understanding for what they might be going through in their own lives. And I think that's an important message that we're sharing here today.
Yeah.
Wow, there's just so much there.
I know. I was going to say it's probably still so much more I could talk to you about. Like it's something, I know when you asked me, it's something, I suppose that's why I'm going to do my own thing as well.
Yes, you are. You've got a podcast.
Yeah, so I'm starting a podcast. I have seen exactly the reason which we've talked about before. There's not a lot out there for young women specifically, or for young people for that matter, and how we navigate these situations. And yeah, I think it's something that I've had on my list for, I've had this on my list for a year that I've wanted to do it. And it's just been, like I spoke about, it's been a lot going on, but not a lot going on, if that makes, yeah. And I really felt like I had to be mentally in the right headspace to be able to do this as well, because I don't think it's fair on myself or other people if I wasn't. So, but I'm also very aware that I'm very good at procrastinating, and I could just probably sit on it a little bit longer. So you just got to rip off the Band-Aid and get it done.
I think if there's a level of perfectionism in there, and I'm sure that there and guilty
Definitely.
is charged as well. It took me a while before I even started mine, but there is no perfect time, and there isn't always going to be the perfect headspace, because as you say, it is a roller coaster, and it is ups and downs, and you've been very good at sharing the highs and the lows. Kudos to you. And I think that with the podcast, honor that journey as well, because if you're committing to doing it every so often and it happens to be a shit day and you don't have much energy, sorry for saying shit so much, guys, if that offends you, probably should.
It doesn't offend me.
But
I'll probably offend people when they hear the name of the podcast. That's what I'm worried to offend.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. I think, like, oh man, swearing, whatever, like, it's just, but what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that, for me as well, like, I want to do my podcast more regularly, and I haven't. It dropped off after my father's passing, and that was just me honoring my grief process and my own emotions, and putting my energy, like you said, it's like you have to learn where you're putting your energy, and it's like, well, I'm putting my energy into my clients, into my work, into what I do, and so then it leaves a little bit less to do these extra activities, because there's only so much you can do, and you have to create boundaries. And going through any life-changing situation as you have, especially, it forces you to reevaluate your life and who's important, what's important, and who you're going to allow into your space, because there are a such thing as energy vampires. I know people joke about it, but it's a true thing. And it's like, some people are just not worthy of your time and your energy, and it just ensuring that you're continually topping up your cup, because you do love training, you do love being competitive and being social, all these things that are you, that I've always known you to be. I still am pleased to see that you're doing those things, and also sharing that, hey, this week's a bit shit, so like, that's just real, that's real you. Like,
it is. And I think they talk about a lot, like psychologists and that or doctors, when you talk to them with a metastatic diagnosis, that you have to learn your new normal. Because unfortunately, as much as I want to be exactly the same person as pre-diagnosis, I have now, validated and I accept that I'm not. And I'm unfortunately not going to be that same person, because it's just, it will drive me to the ground if I try and be that person, because, there's just, there's changes that have been made, obviously, my body and my mental health, in my physical, emotional, like, there's just a lot going on. And unfortunately, it's a daily thing. It's not something I can stop and forget about. So they do say you learn to, like any grief, you learn to, it will never not be there, but you just learn to deal with it better.
Yeah, exactly right. Like, grief is literally a lifelong thing. It doesn't just like, 6 months later and everything's okay. It's literally a lifelong journey and process. And I think, I still see the qualities of you. You're just a new version of you. And it happens to have appointments and medicines and things that you've got to take, but it has forced you to grow and to change and adapt to what your body is now doing. As you said, you've gone through medically induced what do you call it, menopause. just when I had a mind blank there, but like, you know, it's
maybe you should get that checked now.
Yeah, well, hey. No, but yeah, it's a real thing. There's a lot to deal with, and especially at accelerated rate, because it generally takes 10 years for it to process to set in. You didn't have that time.
No. Yeah, that's a whole nother chapter as well. Menopause and perimenopause and all of that stuff that don't teach young girls in school, because I think they won't have to deal with it until, you know, later in life, but then they never learn it. Anyway.
Yeah. And everyone's situation's different. Sometimes some people don't really notice, and
yeah. Well, my mum said she didn't notice, so lucky her.
Yeah. My mum too.
I'm like, thanks, Mum. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, yeah, I think considering, you know, that it has been a life-altering year and a bit for yourself, you know, you have had some really cool experiences, you know, with the Donnie Galela is it how?
Yes. Yeah.
That ultimate pamper day.
That was,
so cool.
That was another, I suppose, pinch me moment, because it's kind of like was with obviously 4 other women, and, you know, sadly, one of those women has actually passed away in that time. And I think that's, again, something that hits home, that this is real. Like, she looked well. But it was one of those things, even sitting there, and he had Samantha Jade come out and like sing to us. It was just like, you're sitting there going, is this real? Like, or kind of that, even for me, like a bit of a, which is shit, because no one wants to be in your situation, but that imposter syndrome type thing. Like, I shouldn't be here. Like, this shouldn't be happening to me. You know, this is crazy. I don't feel like this should be me, but, you know, it was a really beautiful put on day, and like experiences like that. And that's, I suppose, what I look at now, is life is all about experiences. And I know we touched on before, we said like there was a period where you didn't do the podcast, but it's, I suppose, when you do talk, it probably brings you so much joy. And it's those things that I know that I'm doing, you know, when I don't do it, I like feel a little bit funny or shit or whatever. But then when I start talking about it, I know that it brings me so much joy. And that's what makes me feel like this is what I should be doing. I need to be talking about this more. Yeah. So opportunities, like that was an amazing opportunity. And I hope that there is more opportunities to speak out. Because I think I do have a voice, I think, that can be heard.
Absolutely. You know, we all do. And I had that with starting the podcast. I'm like, oh, there's a gazillion other podcasts. Why should I start one? And it's like, well, same as you know, like some people say like, oh, you share so much of your personal life online. And it's like, well, because of those people who say, thank you, I needed that today. And it's those people that is the reason why I keep showing up, and the reason why I keep doing this, you know, because this doesn't pay monetarily, but it's so much more rewarding when you know that it can have the reach. You know, someone can hear this in 6 months' time and be dealing with their own diagnosis and be like, okay, I know what I have an idea of what I sort of need to do, or it is normal to feel the way I'm feeling. You know, and it's emotional support, knowing that there are other people who have gone through it, are going through it, and who are ready and able to listen, you know, be there.
Exactly right. And that's, I suppose, where I'd hope, even if someone needed support, they'd be like, oh, well, Ria did this amazing podcast. I think you should listen to it. And, you know, sharing that with someone that might need to hear it. And I'm sure they do that with other podcasts that you have. Exactly what I suppose the whole social side of thing is all about, is sharing ideas, and sharing honest, open communication.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why I really wanted today to just be, you know, an open conversation, heart to heart, bit of a catch up that we're
That's
sharing
right.
publicly. And you know, an opportunity for you to, if anyone asks you for all the details, you'd be like, hey, just listen to this episode, and there's a
Exactly.
lot of the details there for you,
Yeah.
so you don't have to repeat it a gazillion times either. But and also so people can find you, because you know you are an inspirational role model in this space. And you know, yes, you didn't ask for this to be your platform, but the universe works in these ways, and it says, now Jen, this is you, this is what you're doing,
Yeah,
and this
exactly.
is the impact you're going to have on the world, and you are going to empower women in this. Like, this is going to be your platform, as it is health and fitness is my platform, but yet we impact people on many other levels. So that's all it really is, isn't it?
It is. And it is a beautiful thing. But people can find me on a couple of different Instagrams, but personal one is just Jen Byles, all one word. And then the podcast is a Fuck Cancer Podcast, because you never hear anyone say yay cancer. So it is FK Cancer Podcast, all one word.
And when are you starting that, Jen? When's it dropping?
I have started doing some little test audios and intros, and having some guests lined up in the next few weeks. So plan is to get it out as a little Christmas present, to get it out there to the world just before Christmas.
Nice. All right. You heard it here first. So this is
Nothing like ripping that Band-Aid off.
Yeah, no, definitely. And definitely follow her to stay in tune with her journey. And a question that I obviously ask everybody who's been on the show is, what does summoning your superhuman mean to you?
Ooh. I think mine is just being that voice for the people that can't. So again, it's a very selfless thing, but it's that having that strength to talk about the things that people don't necessarily want to hear. And I think I've always been that. So I think it's honoring who I am. And that's my superpower.
Drop the mic. Yes, honoring who you are. I love that. And that's also why we get along so well. You are just you are a spectacular superhuman on every level. Competitive, strong, literally in every sense of the word. And so it's been an honor and pleasure to know you, work with you, and speak to you today. So I want to thank you so much for being here. And yeah, let's leave it there, guys. Connect with her and tune into her podcast coming soon. All right.